Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Education and Children's Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name is Cttee Kerry Jenkins, and I'm going to be the chair today. I do have to give notice that this meeting is being recorded and read for live webcast and subsequent broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel. Now, I am aware that we are waiting for some members to arrive and they have been held up. So what I'm proposing to do is to take the action notes and action tracker after item 5, and we're going to start with Aquarius. So Carl, I'm going to hand straight over to you. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name's Carl Bees, and this is our first time presenting an overview of the Young People's Substance Use Service to the Education and Children's Social Care Overview Scrutiny Committee. It's nice to meet you all in person. I'll just do some introductions. I'm Carl Bees. I'm a Commissioning Manager for Adult Public Health Services. And
John Green, I'm Commission Manager at Adult Social Care. I've still got some specifically people service.
Hi, good morning. I'm Chris Taggart. I'm Secretary of the Health Team responsible for issues.
And our colleagues from Aquarius today are
I'm Richard McVeigh. I'm Head of Service for Aquarius, a Midlands-based addictions charity.
And I'm Wesley King. I'm a Senior Practitioner for Birmingham Young People Service.
Thank you all. Everybody's had a copy of our presentation and supporting information. So I think straight into it, the current position regarding young people's substance use, we've given an overview. I won't talk through the slides verbatim, but it's non-statutory, but we've got a legal duty to protect children from harm, reduce any health inequalities and improve the health of our local population by ensuring we've got those public health services in place. We've got details that was delivered by our colleagues at Aquarius. The ages of the young people we work to. It's a 2-year contract and it currently ends on the 31st of March 2023. Contract values in there of approximately £673,000 per year. And the key commissioning intentions are minimising the misuse of drugs, alcohol and tobacco and reducing risk and vulnerabilities in a holistic approach. So over to you, Chris, for an update on the 000 city strategy.
Thank you. So 000 strategy is the name of our draft strategy. It's currently draft for substance use to take us up to 2030. It was drafted in February 2020, and we, due to delays because of COVID, we went out to public consultation in May this year for 12 weeks. We've just finished analysing responses. We had approximately 900 responses in total to the consultation from a range of ages and population groups across the city, which we tried really hard to promote and make sure we hear from everyone. It's called 000 because it has 3 key ambitions around zero. 0 deaths due to drug or alcohol addiction, 0 overdoses due to drug and alcohol addiction, and 0 people living with addiction to drugs or alcohol not receiving support to manage their addiction. Like I said, we're currently finalising the consultation feedback report, and we will be following the standard process of incorporating that feedback into our updated draft strategy to go through the governance processes for official sign-off, and we'll be completing the use certificate online and publishing that as well. We hope to have that the updated strategy completed in January. We're currently working on a needs assessment for drug and alcohol addiction as well. So the needs assessment together with consultation feedback will both feed into the final version of the strategy.
Thanks, Chris. So now over to Richard from Aquarius.
Thank you very much for inviting us. We really want you to be able to get a good sense of
as much information as you can about the service that you're commissioning. The Aquarius Young People Substance Misuse Service works across 4 quadrants of the city: North, East, South, West and Central. We're very much about taking the service to where young people are, so we're very embedded within existing children's and educational services. Most referrals come to our service by professionals. Most young people aren't saying, yes, I think I've got a problem with substances, or I need to get support because my parents and carers are. Most people need the assistance of professionals. So we work very closely with children's services and within educational services to make sure young people get the support that they need. They often will come through our single point of contact, and we'll be taking the service to wherever young people are to deliver it to them, predominantly face-to-face. Most staff may begin as a brief intervention to engage the young person. Most young people aren't saying, I'd really like to see you for the next 6 months and get some support, and that would be really helpful. Our job is to engage and to build trust and ensure that they go from a position of saying, I'm not sure why I'm seeing you, my social worker or my teacher said I should see you, to a position within a few weeks for them to be saying, you're okay, I think you might be able to help me. Moving on to the second slide, just so that you're aware, we work with both young people who have an issue with substances themselves, I'm focal clients, and working with young people that are affected by somebody else's substance use. And something to be aware of, the nature of providing support around substance misuse to young people has changed considerably over the years. The old way of providing services that was providing a discrete intervention around somebody, drug awareness or helping somebody to make the change in their substances is not the standard now. It's very much working with young people around a range of complexities. As you'll see from one of the slides as we go through the presentation, most of the young people we're working with have 2 or more complexities that they have in relation to what's going on in their life. We're very much about working with building young people's resilience and ensuring that they can cope, survive and flourish regardless of what's happening with their substance use or with parental substance use at the time. We have a range of interventions that are listed on the second slide. The way we work with young people is not just about building a trusting relationship, building an attachment with them so that they can receive the support. It is about delivering evidence-based interventions. What we know will help young people to make a change in their life, to be able to be more resilient and to make it into adulthood with better opportunities, better choices, and more aware of what they need. We provide a range of training to our staff. We have highly skilled staff that are trained in methodology. So we have all staff are trained to work around hidden harm. And our key model for working with that is the 5-step family model, which is a way of, particularly building up the amount of social support or protective adults around young people, about building an awareness of who positive peers are, helping young people to engage and gain the benefits of education, to develop their hobbies, talents and interests. Very much we're about is providing alternative opportunities and choices to substance use. For many young people, unless you're offering them alternatives, it's going to be very hard for them to make a change. All our staff are trained in that approach. And we're very much about contextual safeguarding. All of our workers are trained to provide coordinated care. So generally based on an assessment of all holistic needs of the young person, to develop a plan that's co-produced with that young person and to deliver those interventions over a period of time to achieve those objectives. We very much recognise that we're not the only agency that can assist or support the young person. So it's very much important that we work as coordinating a team of services around that young person. And on the next slide there, within our partnership approach, you can see we work very closely around whole range of services around accommodation, exploitation, and particularly an issue for us that we've seen growing over the last few years is around not just child sexual exploitation, but the criminal exploitation of the young people that we work with. Many of our young people are being drawn into the drugs trade with the attendant gang involvement and violence that goes on around that. We are very much about working closely with agencies that assist around diversion from violence and being drawn into the drugs trade. That is something that takes time and trust with young people, providing alternatives. Diversion is the key. And we're very much about working with young people around their mental health and working with Forward Thinking Birmingham, because again, a significant part of the work we do is around young people and the impacts on their mental health, and ensuring that young people are in education and achieving results so that they can move on in their life. Obviously, this has been impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. We've had to adapt to providing a blended approach of sometimes providing video conferencing meetings, but telephone support. Obviously, that depends on what sort of equipment or on whether you people have a smartphone to engage with us. Very much we've been adapting our approach. We've done things like walk and talk appointments, where you meet the young person on their doorstep, take them for a walk so they continue to receive the intervention. There have been some benefits in that it can be quite hard to get all professionals around in a physical room. The abilities to provide multi-agency meetings via video conferencing is a real benefit that we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. So in terms of data, if you look at the complex needs page, what you can see from that is more than 2/3 of the young people we're working with will have 2 or more complexities. Some will have as many as 7. So that can include things like having additional accommodation needs, issues around their mental health, dealing with domestic abuse, and being in outside of formal education. So there'll be a whole range of complexities that the young person may be dealing with at the time. So it is absolutely essential that we provide coordinated care plan support and work with a team of professionals around the young person. The next slide there just gives you an idea of some of the hotspots or the areas where we're providing particular support, and around the central area of Birmingham, we've got particularly high caseload of young people, and working very closely with the youth vending team around making sure that we are providing diversion for young people away from the drugs trade and from violence that goes with it. Just in terms of the demographics, the peak age that we're working with young people is around 15 to 16. And as you can see from around the data around ethnicity, more than 50% of the young people that we're working with are from BAME communities. So very much for us is about working with young people to engage them into the support that we receive, that they need to receive. Key substances for young people are particularly around the use of cannabis. Cannabis and alcohol in combination is the key drugs that we're supporting young people with. As you can see from the data, the number of people that we're working with just on alcohol is very small. The number of opiate users, heroin users is very small. Cannabis and alcohol are the key drugs that we're working with around young people. And aiming to kind of provide an alternative route away from drugs at an early age, and from that escalating onto Class A drugs, i.e. heroin and crack. We've got really good service user feedback. As you can see, more than 3/4 of the young people we're working with feel that we've increased their knowledge around substance use, increased their knowledge around health risks, social risks, and as you can see, 100% of young people would recommend us to other young people or to other family members. We also provide a lot of added value. We've got additional wraparound services that we commission. You may well be aware that we've got a grow service. We've got a very large garden at our main office in Edgbaston. We have a horticulture project there where young people can work together and provide an opportunity to grow and cook nutritional food. We've got our award-winning Evolved Cafe. We've got 2 cafe sites where we provide employment opportunities for young people. One at the Adam and Eve in Digbeth and the other at the Commonwealth Games headquarters at Brindley Place. We're also part of the Transitions Hub. So we have a transitions worker that works specifically with young people that have accommodation need and work very closely with St Basil's around the Transitions Hub. We're also very much in terms of our work with parents and carers. For us, it's about building the resilience of young people, but also working with carers to build their awareness of what they can do to support the resilience and the coping of young people, either around their own substance use or being affected by a parent's substance use. We also provide opportunities for young people to volunteer with us. We've built up a young people's participation group. There's currently about 12 young people that we're working with in the participation group. Because for us, we want to co-produce the service. We want them not just to give us feedback. We don't want to just give them a feedback form. We want to provide a focus group for them to help us make decisions about the service that we should be delivering and any gaps that they can see in our provision. There's a brief case study there, just as an example, of young people that was on a child in need plan, had been initially removed from her mother and then returned, who developed issues around child sexual exploitation and substance use. There were concerns about the young person staying out late as a 16-year-old with older peers and becoming distanced from family life. So real concerns around the vulnerabilities of this young person and home life becoming difficult to manage for parents. We work with a range of agencies, including Bernardo's, the police, social workers, Forward Thinking Birmingham. And for us, it was very much around formulating a case to intervene, to support the young person, working with a multi-agency approach, building a positive relationship with the young person, to build their awareness of kind of positive peers, alternatives that they had, getting them support around their mental health, involving them in the GROW project as a diversionary activity and to build new relationships and positive peers. And the outcome of that support was about providing interventions to make change happen. The young person was able to identify what positive peer was. They had stopped misusing substances, this was particularly around their cannabis use. They were able to explain their understanding of what exploitation was and to begin to process that, build their relationships with their mum and stepdad a lot better, and were able to finish school and attend college beyond their formal education. So a positive outcome in terms of that particular case study. So I'm aware that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully that was enough to give you a bit of more flavour of what we do. And myself and Wes will be open to any questions to give any more detail or any aspects you feel haven't covered.
No, that is absolutely wonderful, and thanks for that. You've done 20 minutes. Can you?
Is it bang on?
I think it might be a minute ahead.
Yeah, you've followed the instructions perfectly, so thank you for that. I mean, obviously, I hope everybody's read the report, and people that are watching at home, please go and have a look at it, because it was a really comprehensive report full of detail and information, and people I know will find that really interesting. I know that we've all found that very interesting. And it's just, for me, seeing that partnership approach that you're following is so important, because I know that there are lots of really good work in Birmingham with young people, but we don't get to hear about all of it. And where that's working with other service providers, that's the best approach to take. And we know that, and that's what works. So, for me, that's very, very good. I was going to ask a question about how young people are referred, but you answered that one. What I will ask, though, is would it be possible for you to let us have some information for elected members about the referral process? Because that'd be really useful to add to our sort of resource toolkit when we're dealing with casework. So for me, that'd be really interesting. Chris, I've been lucky enough to hear a very longer presentation on the 000 drug strategy in a different forum, and that was a really interesting area. And I know that you haven't finished analysing the results yet, but are the results so far coming in as expected? Are the responses as you expected, or is there something that sort of caught your eye and thought, oh, put you on the spot there?
We had as you would expect, we had a wide range of responses. One of the key things is that a lot of responses would like us to appear. There's a perception that we're not realistic with the 000 ambitions, that we're not going to get to 0 deaths, 0 overdoses, and we're not going to provide support to everyone, i.e. 0 people not getting the support they need. And there appears to be a feeling that we should be more realistic, because then people would have more faith in our strategy. So that's something we're exploring in a minute, how we represent that and how we amend our ambitions possibly going forwards.
And that'll be the next step, won't it?
Yes, yeah.
I'm going to bring in Sarah and then Kath, and then I'll come over here then. So,
thank you. I found the presentation really interesting, and there's things I like about it. I like the fact it's holistic. I like the fact that you're working in partnership. I like the fact that it's evidence-based. Success stuff. I think that's really key. I'm not a councillor, but I am a member of this committee, so I don't always get to hear what everyone else hears. But I just want to understand a little bit about how this is going to feed into the next bit of it. So this is a 2-year contract being extended, if I'm right, and with the future is the 000 thing. So how does what we're benefiting from the Aquarius work going to land in the 000 thing? And 2, how do you measure the success of the work you're doing? I've seen the satisfaction thing, but do you track people and see if they come back? And what are statistics telling us about that? I know some of it's qualitative, so it's you might not have numbers, but see case studies and anecdotal thing, which is just as valid. But I just want to know how you. If 89% of people are saying, I'm going to change my lifestyle as a result of this programme, what percentage of that 89 actually do that, or come back to you, or into a different service with the council?
Yeah, I can pick up part 1, the 000, and then Richard, if you could pick up the second part. I think the triple, in relation to 000 and young people's substance use, we've extended the contract because we got authority to under delegated authority, so that ends on the 31st of March 2023, and that dovetails with the adult service, and the 000 city strategy is a city strategy for all ages, so young people are included in that. So when we get to the next stage, which will be, as Chris alluded to, amending the strategy if required, going out to re-tender the contract, young people's substance use will be included amongst the adult service. Whether we have 2 lots, so we say, here's the adult service to tender for, here's the young people's, that's what we'll work through with Aquarius and the key stakeholders, and most importantly, service users from both services, the adult service and young people, will be part of that in the shaping of the service specification, etc. That real co-production work and that engagement with them So I think that's where we are in terms of 000. And we just felt it was important to align both contracts. So they're both running at the same time, etc. And there's good partnership working with the young people service and the adult service, vice versa. We may look at moving forward. Predominantly we work up to 18-year-olds, sometimes up to the age of 24, depending on vulnerabilities. It's whether we enhance that offer further. So Aquarius work with young people up to the age of 24, that will be considered, because that aligns with the work that Forward Thinking Birmingham do around mental health with supported housing that all run up to the age of 24. So if our service runs up to 24, there's less chance of young people coming out of the service at 18, disappearing off the radar for 4 or 5 years, and then reappearing in the adult service. So I think if we can do some work around keeping them engaged for a little bit longer, I think that would be really positive.
It's worth noting that the national view is, even if you have one provider of services, you need 2 very distinct services, because the vulnerabilities of young people, safeguarding, etc. And also the fact that in Birmingham, our adult population in terms of substance use is an ageing population, particularly around the Class A drugs. So they're getting older, sort of prescriptions, methadone, etc. And it's not an environment young people would engage with. Wouldn't expect them to. I'd be very concerned. So as I say, the national thinking is 2 very distinct services rather than one size fits all, which would never work.
Thanks, Carl and John. Thanks for that.
So very quickly
Yeah,
on the
sure.
data side, within substance misuse, we're part of the National Drug Treatment Monitoring System. We can give you as much data as you really want in that sense. The engagement rates are really important. We have about 80% attendance rate and engagement plans to ensure young people stay in service and making sure there's really proactive follow-up either by telephone, with other professionals, with family members, get their details where with agreements, and also do on-spec visits sometimes just to try and catch somebody in the sense of to re-engage them into support, because it's the consistency over time that makes the difference. And then we also monitor, we have what's called an outcome star. So we measure on a 10-point scale people's mental health, physical health, their relationships and their substance use. So we measure a whole range of areas, and we're able to see how much that changes in terms of by self-report over a period of time. And the data is really good in the sense that if you keep somebody engaged over a period of time, they will make significant changes in terms of their experience of their lifestyle at that point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you for that. You've answered a lot of my questions with that very answer, and I'm really, I'm a bit of a data geek, and I'd be really interested to see that data, because I think it's a celebratory data to see people transitioning out of substance misuse, etc. One of my questions is harm minimisation. I know you do mention harm with the individuals, but do you have a strategy around harm minimisation within society itself and within the individual families, etc.? So if a person wants to come off drugs or go for a job interview or whatever, do we provide them with a bus pass? Something as simple as that in terms of harm minimisation, so they don't have to go and steal something to get their bus pass, etc. So that's a really bad example, but you know what I mean. Also, with regards to ACEs and trauma, I'm very interested in the responses to the therapies that these kids or young people, the outcomes of that, and then their outcomes and their transition to adulthood, or not necessarily adulthood, actually transitioning into a different world, a different life and different outcomes. And do you work with the transition to adulthood teams, and do you work with the early help model teams as well? Leave it there for now.
Okay, do you want to grab those?
I might come to you about harm minimisation for adults. I mean, for us, harm minimisation working, say, for example, with parents of a young person that might be using, is very much about helping them have an understanding of the young person's needs, providing the right sort of support, i.e., as opposed to kind of emotionally berating them, but looking at ways to kind of influence change. So it's very much how we influence parents to provide the right sort of support or response. And what we talk about is looking at a range of responses. So often, without being awful, parents become a bit one-dimensional. They're stressed, and their response becomes a bit linear. We look to open out. There's a whole range of responses for different situations to reduce the harm for the young person. An engaged, tolerant, or a withdrawal response. In short, I could talk about that all day, but obviously we're short of time. So it's about making their response a bit more sophisticated based on the situation. In terms of the young person, harm reduction, we're very much making them aware of if the parent is using, knowing about safe storage boxes for substitute medication around drugs. We're very much about making them aware of how to deal with emergency situations. And getting in touch with emergency services and recovery position, all those sorts of things we will be working with young people about. And in terms of their own harm minimisation, is making them aware not just of how to kind of reduce substances, but aware of who protective adults are and how to seek support and who positive peers are, and kind of alternatives to substance use in terms of coping. In terms of trauma, I mean, from our point of view, ACEs gives a way of understanding the various complexities the young person has, but obviously around intervention, us very much around, I suppose, keeping it simple, it's about connection and about providing agency to the young person that's experienced trauma. So for us, it's about making connections and reducing isolation. So in terms of connection with positive peers, supportive adults, and within, supportive services, but also giving them a sense of agency, planning for a future, i.e. the adversity that you're in now won't be everything that you face for the future. You will have more choices, and helping them plan what sort of life do you want in the future. So that for me is essential. And we work with transitions teams very closely around that. It's a key stage. It can be the difference between the young person thinking, this is what my lifestyle is going to be forever, or this is a springboard for me to change and move into a more positive experience, even if their childhood hasn't been very supportive or nurturing, in the sense that your future can be different if you kind of build it now with us. In terms of harm minimisation for adults, I don't know whether it's a hand over, but within adult services, we provide adult services in other areas. For us, it's about looking at helping people look at the impacts of their substance use on them as an adult, providing the opportunity for them to again engage in services, taking the service to them where need be, as opposed to we'll wait for you to come to us. Our point is this: if people were motivated enough to change their substance use, they wouldn't need us. We have to take the service to where people are, engage them, make them have the hope and believe that they can change, and give the interventions to make a difference.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to take one last question because we are just slightly over now. Sue, do you want to come in and ask your question? I just introduced Sue Harrison. She's our Director of Educational Skills, so she might have a hard question for you.
Well, first of all, like everybody, I'm really impressed at the child-centred, young person-centred approach that we're adopting here, because it is definitely the way to go to classroom where people are, where instead of expecting them to meet certain criteria to have a service. I thought the numbers of alcohol and drugs were quite low, and that really surprised me actually, knowing what I know about alcohol use with young people, and clearly your role is to support with alcohol. But I did wonder whether this committee might want to ask the same questions about the alcohol, because we know the damage that does to young people. We know the numbers of children who are living with parents who are dependent on alcohol is far bigger than the number of children that are living with substance misuse than adults. And the damage is pretty similar in terms of the ACEs that it's got referred to. So I'm just thinking, this is a similar question to pose to council, building on that. How do you work with the alcohol support, and what's that bigger picture?
So for me, what's crucial is the non-specialist side of the children's workforce and family support workforce at early health stage is building their awareness to be able to identify and screen alcohol use. Often parents are presenting with other forms of conversation. It's being able to stop the alcohol use that's going on behind that, to be able to get them to get support, because a lot of that will remain hidden for quite a while until it reaches the point where it's being referred into a formal intervention, a statutory service intervention for child protection. What we need to do is catch it as early as possible. And for us, we work with the non-specialist workforce to raise their awareness of alcohol and drugs, particularly alcohol, and for them to be able to identify it, have a conversation with parents about why it's relevant, and then to look to engage them into receiving the support they need.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for coming today, educating us all about the work that you're doing. We're very grateful. You are welcome to stay till the end of the meeting, but I'm sure that you've all got stuff that you want to get on with. John's nodding, yes. So yeah, thank you very, very much. And we look forward to getting some additional information if you've got some for us. That'd be great. So yeah, you are free to leave now.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to just skip back to point 2 on the agenda and concede any apologies.
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Adam Harding, Omar Hamid, Councillor Kuna, Holly Ballard, and
Thank you very much. I also do need to ask any declarations of interest today, and members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Have we got any? No, thank you very much. And then we'll move on to point 4, which are the action notes and action tracker. So we need to confirm the notes of the meeting of the 1st of September. Are you happy to confirm those? Thank you very much. Also, we need to note the action notes from the 13th of October. And we also need to note the action tracker. And are there any points that any committee members would like to raise on the action tracker? No, thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to item 6 on the agenda, and I'd like to welcome Ilgan Yusuf, who is on virtual attendance today. So welcome, Ilgan, and we're very lucky also to have the joint head of youth service, Sula, in the room with us. So I don't know who wants to kick off. Ilgan, Sula, should we go to Ilgan?
Ilgan's kicking off.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, colleagues. So I'm just going to sort of thank you for this opportunity. It's actually we believe we've got a lot of really good news to share in terms of the updates, and Sula's going to very much sort of specify what those are in terms of the report that we've shared and add her own thoughts. I suppose what I just wanted to share from an assistant director point of view is that increasingly we are working across the council with different directorates, and obviously, as always has been the case, working with stakeholders in the community in terms of that more place-based approach. And I do think that is really beginning to pay dividends, and it is increasingly recognised from central government. And so part of my update will be on some of the sort of benefits of that early on, and I think maybe some of the direction going forward. So I mean, the first thing I want to say is that we really do value the voice of young people. And we have the Youth City Board, which is now formally constituted as part of the wider City Board. And we think that the work that Sula and her colleagues in the youth service to support and to facilitate that is really bearing dividends, and you will see in the report that it's actually, on a very practical level, helped us in the selection process for very senior positions within the council, and also has, in terms of our work around library services, we've got some really good feedback there early on. You know, and what we've discovered is that our library services are much stronger for you know, for young children, and also for adults, but less so for that period in terms of maybe in late teens and early 20s in terms of young people. So some really good practical suggestions on that. On that note, in terms of the next step, we are working on a proposal for a beefed up, if you like, youth parliament or youth participation forum, which is part of, because I said earlier about working with colleagues across the council in a way which we feel is going to add value. As part of that early intervention and prevention work, we're doing a joint proposal with that team around that youth participation project. We've looked at, Sula and I and colleagues have looked and spoken to youth services across the country and tried to pick out what we think we could learn, as well as reinforce what we're doing really well. And from that, we put together this proposal, and part of that proposal would be funded from the Community Renewal Recovery Plan post-COVID. So that's where it's at. We're very excited. We're going to know the outcome of that before Christmas. So perhaps at the next Scrutiny Committee in the new year, or I can share it before that. I can give some definitive update. But that will be really exciting. And I think some, you know, 2 or 3 sort of key messages of that would be that would be asking people to not just, if you like, scrutinise council proposals, but also initiate them, and also not just in the here and now, but thinking at longer term what young people might want from a city in terms of the 2040 city vision. So it's that short-term and long-term perspective. So we think that's really, really important. The other thing to add is that the directorate itself, as you can see, we have Sue with us today. So it's a really exciting time for the directorate, and one of the important pieces of work that we're doing at the moment as a directorate team is setting the priorities for the the next 3 to 5 years, but very importantly, what that roadmap to excellence will look like over the next 12 months in terms of those priorities, and how we're going to take it there, and actually what does success and positive outcomes look like. And I think that's going to be really key. And what I'd like, we're doing that work, and what I'd like to do is we'll be a far more advanced stage in the new year on that. And what I would like to do is make a request that we come back and actually engage you in what we're doing there, and for you to also feel that you're able to offer a perspective as well, because it's really about making sure we get it right, and we really want to work with everybody up towards that. I think the other thing I would say, and I said earlier about central government, what's not in the paper. So we've recently just won a really important expression of interest, which we secured around something called Partnerships for People and Place, and it was commissioned or tendered from the central government department for levelling up housing and communities. And I think just generally nationally, that there's a recognition that central governments themselves need to work across their own departments. And really, the importance of this project is that, yes, there will be some funding to it. So it will be up to £350,000, which we will need to further submit a delivery plan for to get all of that money. And the project itself will be delivered in the financial year 22-23. But the great scope for it is actually to work in a more flexible way with those central government departments, but also within the local area and regions and external agencies such as DWP, the Combined Authority, and indeed across the different age groups. So I think all of that is really important in terms of, again, that early intervention, and what we're looking to do is propose a pilot for the area of East Birmingham, and we think that's really key. So it's about looking at perhaps even before people have thought about being in the job market, actually what kind of careers advice might they need. And I think all of you, or a lot of people, will be familiar with the Breaking Down Barriers report that was released in July. What we'd be looking to do, there are 10 recommendations for young people in that report. And although the report was broadly focused on that sort of the whole world around skills and employability, but it was looking at the much more deep causes in terms of structural barriers. So we would be wanting to do that focus as part of that. I think the other thing to say is that we've got the digital inclusion strategy, which again cuts across the different age groups. So that will be launched on the 30th of November, so it's obviously very soon. And although the council's, and this was part of a cabinet paper that was approved in September, I think the key thing there is that it cuts across all the different age groups. And crucially, we will be although the council will be offering that leadership, it's very much one of facilitative and listening, and the actual planning of it will be with local stakeholders and communities. So I'm just going to sort of just finish and then hand over to Sula. So I think the big message there is that it's about working across the different directorates. It's about working crucially with people themselves in shaping the services, but also ultimately judging what those outcomes will look like. And I think that lifelong approach, and working, with young people, but also increasingly working with their families and their immediate communities, I think that's going to be a key part of how we take forward our strategy and delivery plan. We think it's a really exciting opportunity, and there's lots of fantastic stuff to build on. So perhaps, if I may, Chair, hand over to Sula to talk more about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ilgen. Thank you for that. And it is really good to hear about that additional funding and actual realisation from central government that youth services really do work. And all we need them to do now is give us a statutory youth service with ring-fence funding, and we'll be well away. Sula, I'll pass over to you.
Absolutely, and I endorse that completely. But thank you very much. Apologies that what I should have done is put some comments in people with me, and I apologise for that. You've heard Ilgen kind of given the overview of what I wanted to do, so I'm not going to go through every bit of my report that hopefully you've all seen, but just pick up some key points. What I really don't want to do as well is do what I tend to do, so I'm going to pick up some key points and then go through the whole report. So I'll try hard not to. We are recovering as a service, as a youth service, and we are recovering from COVID. We've had an extremely strange epidemic. Really strange epidemic. I can't think much to use. I can't believe I was told to go home and run the youth service in my bedroom. And just how does that work? That's just really quite strange. But somehow or another, we rose to the occasion and our workers kind of delivered, and I'm really proud for everything that they've done in the past 2 years. We're now open, all our centres are open. We're delivering as usual and have been for a very long time, probably from the summer of last year. We've been delivering face-to-face through detached work. And we have learned some lessons through this whole process. And the two main lessons that I think we've learned is around, and this one I knew, and I hope other people know now, the importance of face-to-face work, the importance of actually meeting a young person and talking to a young person cannot be replaced and cannot be valued enough. Digital work is great, Teams is great, Zoom is great, but actually young people and youth workers want to see each other and talk to each other. So that is, if nothing else, it's kind of reinforced the importance of that face-to-face work. And the other thing that we've learned from COVID is that we used to do detached work, we kind of dropped off, going, detached work started we established the importance of detached youth workers, working on people on the streets. And we've made sure that every session, every group that we run, every centre that we run, runs at least one detached project, one detached session a week. So we've got workers going out and meeting young people on the streets. So they're kind of two things that's helped shape our future. Some things that we've done this summer, we've done the HAF programme, which is a health activities fund programme, which is part of that Bring It On run. That was actually really nice. It was great. We were given the brief that we got to work with young people that are our age group, 13 plus, and we were one of the biggest providers of the HAP programme to 13 plus young people. To talk to educate them around healthy living, our main brief was also around make sure they have the best summer possible. They've had kind of horrible time. And actually, not only did we make sure that young people had the best summer possible, our youth workers did as well. It was actually nice for young people and youth workers after such a horrendous time to go out and get involved in activities and have a bit of fun over the summer period. So that was brilliant. We're continuing to run it in Christmas. We're running a much shorter provision in Christmas, and we're hoping to get funding for the next 3 years to be able to continue to run the programme. One of our biggest challenges that we're facing at the moment is around youth violence. And that is a huge challenge. It's actually affecting every young person that we work with and every youth worker as well. All our projects are contributing to the agenda. All our projects are delivering, particularly around prevention and early intervention work. And we have got around early intervention work, that's been delivered in all our centres in terms of having a safe space for young people and having that trusted adult that they can work with and those relationships that they've built up with. We're running some specific programmes. So the Lighthouse is leading on a partnership which is called the Transformation for Change, and they've been funded through the VRU to deliver a different kind of programme around youth work and mentoring young people, providing positive activities for young people, and also outreach work and detached work. So that we've got funding to run that until the end of the financial year. And hopefully that piece of work will help inform how not only we deliver youth work to young people affected with youth violence, but also how the VRU deliver youth work. We also have been funded through the Youth Endowment Fund around peer research, and that's part of working with young people, and young people being part of the solution around youth violence, where we are looking to employ, and we've started to employ young people around being peer researchers, and they're young people that have got lived experience in particular geographical locations of the city, to talk about youth violence, to gather information from other young people about youth violence, to recruit change makers, and also to run social action projects. And hopefully that's a 1.5-year programme, 18 months, and hopefully after that, some of the learning from that will help inform some kind of strategy either in Birmingham or at least nationally, because it's a national programme. We're also delivering in terms of around youth violence and work with the Commonwealth Games too, and we're funding some preventative work, working with young people in specific locations. Newtown being the one at the moment that we're doing some outreach work and using some facilities in Bergen Park. So that's kind of what we're doing around youth violence. We've got young people involved in working with the city to write the city youth violence strategy. This is now due for local authorities local authorities to produce a strategy. Ilka touched on youth voice. I'm really quite passionate about youth voice and actually giving young people a choice and an opportunity to express their views and shape the provision they provide. But not only the provision that is for them, but also the provision that is available in Birmingham for them, their families, and to have a real input into what's happening. I would love to 3 years' time to be sat in scrutiny panel where I've scrutinised by young people and we're being held account as service and as council, they're being held account to young people. So for me, that's what we're trying to work towards. But on a smaller scale, what we're doing now is that we've got young people involved in public health. They're quite vocal in public health. We've got these COVID champions. We've got young people involved in Commonwealth Games and running part of the youth voice in Commonwealth Games. We've got young people involved in interviews, which has been a long time, and they've been involved in appointment to directors recently. And we've also got young people involved in redevelopment programmes, both in what's happening at Cttee and also in the Perry-Barring development. They're having an input and influence in that. I think we're also involved heavily with Commonwealth Games and providing activities, and we're having 4 youth hubs around the Commonwealth Games that are going to be based in the locality so that young people feel connected and young people can think Commonwealth Games is not something that's just happening somewhere in Birmingham, particularly seeing people in the south think it's got nothing to do with me. So we're trying to bring the Commonwealth Games to them, run an activity where they feel connected in the Commonwealth Games. I just want to finish up with, we have, I don't know how much you all know about the youth service, but we have in the past 10 years faced some horrific cuts. And it has been really difficult. We have managed to survive, and we have managed to kind of just keep going and survive. The past 18 months or so, probably just before lockdown, the kind of whole climate around youth work and the recognition of youth work has changed. Government are investing, people are talking more about youth work. They're not investing enough, but people are talking more about youth work. We have opportunities that we've been able to exploit and use. We are developing our service. We're no longer kind of standing still anymore. We're in a position where we're developing. It feels really good. It feels good for youth workers. It feels even better for young people. That we are able to attract external funding. We are able to recruit new workers. And we're able to now kind of pick up our heads and look forward and see that there is a future for the youth service. And it's a rosy future. And the whole thing around early intervention and prevention work is what we always been kind of doing. And there's more recognition of it there. So I think there's good times ahead.
Thank you, Sula. Thank you, Sula. That's been really useful. And I am going to stop you there because I know I've got loads of questions. So you wouldn't expect me not to have any. But I know that Councillor Scott has got some questions and Councillor Ero. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to keep mine in a specific sort of area. And when you spoke a little bit about inclusion, forgive me, this is something you already do consider, but do you work fully inclusively with people with varying disabilities, and what are your strategies around that within the communities, especially with children with autism, and how do you engage with those types of children who are vulnerable, find socialising very difficult, and those are the kids that you're unlikely to pick up within the outdoor environment anyway, and how about that inclusion of those types of children within your remit? So how does that work for you? Okay. Do you want me to take that, Olga?
If you want to take that first, and then I will add some comments, Sula. Thank you.
Sorry, Sula. Can I just raise something first? Because it's on that point. And I am aware of an email that's been circulated from Zimba Following from 7 Underground, raising questions regarding universal youth services and how these are accessed by young people with special needs. So hopefully, you know, Councillor Scott's question will pick up on some of that, and your answer can pick up on some of that. Thanks,
I
Stella.
haven't seen that letters, so, okay.
In terms of working with young people, we probably haven't got as a fully inclusive offer to young people with disabilities and special educational needs as we should do. What we do have is that we do work with young people on an individual basis. So we have numbers of examples of working with young people with autism. We have numbers of examples of working with anxiety. I know that we are working in the north of the city to look at developing a youth provision, actually with Trinity College, who works with young people, with education, centre people, to provide some kind of youth provision for them at Clifton Road. We have run ad hoc groups for young people, particularly with autism, and those are people that we've talked about that are not the young people that we would engage with on the street. And for them, they're achieving, that folded just before COVID, but for them, one of their achievements was kind of like usual stuff about just getting on the bus and going somewhere and back. So we provide a safe space for young people. We're not as good as we should be, and that's something that we can work in partnership with.
Councillor Scott, want to come back?
Yeah, to make the point that if you use the words inclusion strategy and say that it cuts across different age groups, etc., you cannot dismiss the SEND population, the disability population, or all of the minority groups out there from whatever ethnicity or category or whatever. So I'd like to be reassured that the inclusion agenda is as full as it could be, and that there's a strategy on the line for each and every. Whether or not we've got the money to deliver on that, we just need to have the heart to know that it's there.
And I will consider language around universal service, and that's something that I know that I will take on.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sula, because I think language is important and the words that are used are important, and I understand what universal service for youth work is referring to, but you know, there are lots of people that don't. And I think it is important, Councillor Scott, that you noted around we should have, you know, that commitment should be there, and it is for, you know, the council. Actually, we need to be holding the council to account to make sure that the resources are there to enable our youth service to be fully accessible. So as a scrutiny committee, that is, you know, something that we need to be doing as well, because, you know, you can have the commitment to do that, but if you haven't got the resources, it makes it impossible. So take that on board. Councillor Rowe.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Sula and Ilgan, for that presentation. Clearly doing lots of really great work. This is news to me because I only became councillor in May, but so last night I was reading your report and I Googled Birmingham Youth Centre Birmingham. It came up on the council website, and then I said find a youth centre near you, put in my postcode, and it came up as Maypole Youth Centre. I was like, oh, great. And then that was it. Couldn't find anything else about Maypole Youth Centre other than the address. And then I then Googled it separately, couldn't find anything, had a very active Twitter account, but who's on Twitter? Definitely not young people. And I was like, well, how am I meant to find out what activities are going on? If I'm a young person, when am I meant to go there? Then I thought, oh, well, maybe it's just Maypole, maybe it's other ones. Then I thought, oh, the flagship one that I saw was the Lighthouse. Then I did the same with the Lighthouse. Again, couldn't find any information. So if I'm a young person in Birmingham, how am I meant to find out what is going on at these youth centres, when I can turn up, what activities I'd want to be involved in, etc., etc.? Or is it not? Because I was like, well, maybe it's not for just people to turn up to, maybe you have to be invited to go, and that's why you can't find that information. But then it says specifically in here that it's a service open to all young people. But well, how can it be when you can't actually find out what's going on? And I'm moderately computer literate, and I couldn't find it after, 5-10 minutes, and kids are going to give up sooner than that, I should think. So yeah, that was what can be done to improve the finding out for young people what's going on and when they can turn up. And then my other question was about you talked about work with people who are in need, so not in education, employment, training. Yeah. How do you identify those young people? Do you get that information from schools, or what? Do you actively seek those young people out, or is it just if they turn up at the youth centre, do you do things with them? What's happening with that? Because obviously I assume that there's a lot of children who are needs, specifically with additional needs. So
thank you. I know that Ilgan is doing this, but on the need question, but I'll go to Suna first on the information on the website question, because I think you were looking a bit surprised to hear that.
I was surprised that Maple was not on. Our website on BCC is not great, and that's something that we need to do.
They had an email address and a phone number, but then that young person's got to have confidence enough to pick up the phone or send an email, and are they going to have that,
We know that young people will not necessarily access us through the website, because we've never, ever had, that's not been a good way for young people to engage with us. We have a presence on Instagram, and a number of our centres have presence on Instagram and social media and Facebook. So that's kind of a bit about how we publicise, but we don't do it well enough, and I accept
that. I mean, young people, I'm a secondary school teacher, young people aren't on Facebook, so I think
they're on Instagram,
TikTok, Snapchat, that's what they're on.
We're not on Snapchat, but we are on Instagram. We have followers, and groups have followed. But also our centres are based in locality and communities, and most young people know about the Maple Youth Centre. Now, that doesn't take away from the fact that we need to improve our presence on the information. But a lot of young people in that locality know about Maple and will know when they're open, and the youth workers should be there.
I would doubt. Yeah. I've been a secondary school teacher in Birmingham since 2006, and I've never heard a child talk about, let's go to the youth centre. And I used to work in Aston, so I mean, I've never heard that. So.
And you've never heard them talk about even the lighthouse?
No. So I would really. I think that a lot more work has to be done to make young people aware of what services are involved, because it sounds like you're doing fantastic work, but the young people aren't aware of it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point to raise, because anything that can promote the work of the youth service out there in the communities directly with young people is important. So I'm sure that Suna will take that on board. I do feel though that the numbers of young people that the youth service works with actually, I mean, this is, young people who are not being told they have to work with the youth service, but they're choosing to be involved and engage with youth service, show that there are a lot of young people out there that do know about the youth work that is available. But I think there's always room for improvement. Catherine, have you got any other questions?
What about needs?
Before I go to...
No, that's great, thank you.
Ilgan.
Yes, thank you. Just before addressing the question around the need, just on that comms, I mean, I think it's point well made, and I'd like to take that away. And I don't think it's unrelated to what I was saying earlier around that youth participation, because I think as the Breaking Down Barriers report showed, generally young people got very clear views about what kind of comms are, and I think we're doing some fantastic work, and that's clearly been noted here in this conversation. But I think that's a bit of a challenge, and I'm going to take that one away and come back at the next, if I may, Chair. In terms of the need, so in terms of the process for identifying young people at risk of not being in education, employment, or training, there is a process, and it's which starts more or less at this time of year in preparation, for example, for the next academic year 22-23, where we are already working with schools in terms of preparing that September, what's known as the September guarantee, in terms of schools identifying which pupils or young people are at potential risk as they see it based on their knowledge of being at NEET. And they start telling us that. And we brought it forward actually in the last year, and we start working really, as I say, soon after Christmas. And we have Birmingham Career Service, which is 16 to 19, but we also have our 14 to 19 partnership team, which is the key one here. And this also does include, obviously, people with SEND or inclusion support requirements. And I think that's going to be quite key in terms of understanding this. So it is a partnership with schools, and then having identified that, we will then make sure that that person is offered a one-to-one personal consultation, and then the idea is to get to an objective where everybody is leaving school with an offer of a place at the very least, either into work or post-16 provision. And where we are at this moment in time, in terms of the year that the academic year that we're in the middle, we've just started, is actually reviewing what that data is. So there's two things that we will be looking for in terms of statutory returns, in terms of central government reports, is actually how many people are in that NEET rate and how many people are what's known as not known. So in other words, the offer was made and what was the outcome. Broadly speaking, I mean, the figures are yet to be published, so I'm going to be wary about having those figures confirmed and sharing those until they are. But we have made dramatic, in terms of the not known figure, we made a dramatic improvement in the last year. So in other words, we know a lot more about where our young people are at. We also have worked, we've talked about working with schools, but it's obviously working with colleges. So the crucial thing is that's the process. And anybody who's still not got a place, we obviously are working with them at the moment. And it's a very live, day-to-day operational matter in terms of our career service, 14 to 19 schools, and those post-16 providers. So that's broadly the principle of how it works. I hope that clarifies it.
That's great, thank you so much.
Can I just add to that? Of course, yes. Just to add to that, in terms of how do we as a youth service find the young people, because I know we've spoken about the higher level stuff, but we work with young people that we find out are detached, and young people that are known to us, and we already have an existing relationship. We also work very closely with partners, so people like the early help teams refer young people to us. We work with Birmingham Children's Trust and Empower You that will refer young people that are particularly exploited in some way and need. They will refer to us. We work with Puzzle, young people that are homeless, they refer to us. We work also with DWP very closely. As a part of the Youth Opportunity Group, they refer to us to the age of 25. We have two of our centres, our youth hubs, with DWP, and we have work in there. We're able to engage. And we also do door knocks. So we actually have people that we say, your need, can we work where a youth worker, can we work there? So that's all the kind of practical stuff as well that our workers do.
Thank you, Stella. Any other questions? No. Ilgan has, but let me ask my Ilgan. I've only got.
Sorry, Chair. It wasn't so much a question. It's just coming back to send just an additional piece of update because clearly it's important and it's been voiced itself here. The next phase for the youth hubs, which is in the report and Sue has talked about today, is actually a specific and bespoke offer, inclusion and send. And
We've lost you, Ilgen, we can't hear you.
oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back.
All right. Okay. So just very briefly, the next phase for the rollout of youth hubs, and we've got an official launch date on the 20th of January with Cabinet Lead Councillor Francis for Education, Skills and Culture and the Mayor for the West Midlands. So January 20th will be a major formal launch of the youth hubs, and that will take place at Library of Birmingham. But just to sort of say, in terms of supporting people around the send and inclusion priority, that will be the next phase for the youth hubs. And again, I look forward to updating you accordingly on that at the next meeting. And we're using the European Social Fund funding to deliver on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ilgen. Yeah, sure. I'm not going to ask very many questions now because we are running out of time. But any questions I have got, I may just email through because I'm sure that Sula will be able to answer them. Just a couple of very brief things that I want to know in terms of the youth hubs. And I'd be interested to know, not now, but this is something Sula could possibly let me have, how the youth hubs will be different to the old hub model of youth service provision that we have had in Birmingham, or whether the youth hubs are something totally different, so to say, so that's fine. It'd be really good to have an update on what they look like, what they're going to be doing. It'd be great to come back, that's in the March meeting, February March meeting, to give us an update on that stuff. And I've also been really interested to have more information when it's up and running about the peer research and social action programme. I think that's something that sounds really exciting, and is something that is, so important in the context of violence in young people in Birmingham. So very much would like to be in part of the discussion going forward around what we can do to support that work as well. And then finally, the youth strategy for the next, was it 3 years or 5 years sooner, that's being developed? Youth service strategy, 5 years. I mean, clearly that's something that we would like you to come back and talk through with us as well. So I'm going to leave it there just because we are running out of time. I want to thank you both for giving up your time today. I always love having youth service in the room, as you know, so thank you very much. Thanks, Sheila. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ilgen. Right, we're going to move on swiftly, and I would like to introduce, yes, of course, I'd like to. So just bear with us, we're just shuffling chairs in the room. Fantastic. Yes, fantastic. So I want to welcome Sue Harrison, who is Director of Education and Skills. Also, we have Parents Forum, and other officers, and welcome to the Scrutiny Committee today. So can I pass straight over to you to give us a flavour of what's happening and give us an update, more importantly, on SEND. Thank you.
Introduced here, Parent Care Forum, and colleague members of the Parent Care Forum. Would you like to introduce yourselves really quickly, and then we know who you are? Well, that's on your it's great that you give me time on all experienced parents of children with additional needs. So if you'd like just to introduce yourself. I'm Chairman Mark Reed, Parent Care Forum.
I'm Armstrong, I'm part of the room, also the secretary.
We come today as a team just demonstrate really how I'm really pleased as a new director to be coming in and having a strong parent care forum to work with. And obviously, we know that we've got an improvement journey. We're not telling you anything. We just put around this table. But it is worth taking, and I'm seriously taking this as the leading responsible for the improvement journey. And it is week 3, but already some really good discussions and conversations with both the beer colleagues about how we can work in partnership, about how we can understand what genuine production looks like, and where it's appropriate to co-produce or engage. We're really clear about that. And there are some key pieces of work which, to be honest, we were wanting to deliver, even if we were under the direction that we were under. We're not just doing this work because it will because we deliver an action plan. We're doing this work because we get attention out for children. And certainly, as you would imagine, the Ofsted report with a lot of detail and then what parents have said to Ofsted. And what they said is shocking to read, and it's shocking that that's the experiences of children, families and persons. And I will continue to apologise for that at the same time, as we really wanted to make a difference to existing people in the system, but also new people into the system, so that they do their experience. Clearly, we can't undo damage that has been done, has been passed, but we can draw a line under that and move forward with parents and held to account for that. So it's right that it's wanting regular updates on where we are with the plan. And it is actually fairly early days. We're expecting the plan to be approved by the Department of Education literally every day now. I was told last week it was imminent. There's been very positive responses to the plan from the department, so we're not expecting any significant changes. There might be some tweaking. We're also got to a flying start actually with our first board meeting, very well attended. John Godwin is our commissioner, very experienced, and again wanting to work in partnership to support partners to work together. And there was absolute commitment at that meeting. And so far, the milestones in the action plan have been met. Actually, we're anticipating a board report next month. But we're not complacent, there's a lot of work to do. The action plan is critical. It is not the only work that we're doing to improve outcomes for children and people we send. And I can talk about that. I just wanted to be clear, we can't pile all the work into the action plan, because the action plan has to respond to what Ofsted found. And there are more things that we need to fix in order to sort the landscape of special education needs outside that plan. And I would really want to do it in thoughtfulness and growth. Really want to work closely with this committee and sharing those details as they emerge. But you've seen the report, you've read the report. I'm conscious that you'll have questions about it. I think the 4 areas, 4 objectives are absolutely key, and all 13 actions fit into those 4 objectives. So we've got, you'll see it, system leadership, because none of these issues can be sorted out by any one organisation. Getting the basics right, which Pauline is having a real focus on as our interim lead for the service, to really make sure we have got the basics right for our staff, including the right numbers of staff, and she'll give an update later on about the recruitment process for additional staff. Working together well is all about co-production and working in partnership with our parents and children, and Steve will talk a bit more about that. And obviously we've got to have the right pathways to get support as well. So that's the work that's ongoing. If I hand over to Sabine to say a bit about co-production and how we're going to work in the future, and then perhaps Pauline can talk a bit about getting the basics right, and then take any questions about it.
That'd be great. Thank you, Sue.
Oh, Tuesday. Thank you, Sue. So I think it was clear, especially from the report, that co-production is a real challenge in the city. But also it was about taking a little bit of a step back from actually what do we mean by that, and how is it more than just a word that's bandied about. So there's been some discussion around understanding co-production with regards to the 3 services working together: education, social care and health. interagency working. Also, the work within those services, so the cascading of information from SLT down to delivery staff. The focus that we've got as a forum is actually around the co-production and the engagement between the LA, the CCG, the Children's Trust and the families, because we feel that that's actually what lent itself to the outcome of the report. So we do now have a co-production officer in the city, a lady called Maria McCaffrey, who we are working quite closely with. And she has been tasked with producing a report by the end of the year. We also have a gentleman called Tony Boved, who has been brought in from Birmingham University, who's a professor of co-production. And there's been some fantastic initial strategic meetings to sort of clarify the roles. Because obviously, you've got these three players in this space. And so we have come to an agreement around Maria leading on that work as the co-production officer. Tony is doing a lot of facilitating, and then we're sort of there as a critical friend and bringing the parent voice to it. Initially, we were spoken about having a co-production event, which we, as the forum, wanted it to be a full day workshop where we would have officers attend from the three services and ourselves, and that was all planned to happen in April 2020, but unfortunately COVID got paid for that. And then we felt it was too important to do virtually, and obviously at the time the conversation was still around the potential of the world reopening later in the year. So where we are to date is that we were able not so much to have the event, but bring a group of SLTs together, which I'm sure you can appreciate is not easy in Birmingham, managing some big diaries. The request was for a 3-hour event, but we only managed to get an hour. But it was a really productive meeting where we talked about a shared definition of co-production in Birmingham, because I think it's important to understand co-production means different things to different people. So when Maria came into post, she did actually send a form out with 2 questions asking what does co-production, give a definition of co-production, and the second question was give an example of where a good example of co-production. So I think the main aim of that group is to have a Birmingham shared definition of co-production, and also get the clarity around in this space we're talking about co-production with regards to the establishment engaging with families. And that work is ongoing, and it will be integrated into some ongoing roadshows. So we had an engagement event on the 15th of September at Carsdale, which was very well attended. The day was a hybrid event, and it was run where we had a workshop. We took a lot of learning from that event by reading the room and understanding that actually the presentations didn't land so well, but the workshop really got the buzz going in the room. And so we have used that intel to shape the future events. And we're looking at about 6 that would take part in various parts of the city, 1 virtual and 1 central, so that we're able to make them as accessible as we can. And the co-production agenda will be integrated into those roadshows. And we're hoping, Sue will be able to bring you an update on how we continue on our journey of co-production.
Thanks, Xavier. Pauline?
Yes, thank you. So of the 4 that Sue's explained, so 2 of them are moving. The other 2 haven't really started, but it's absolutely right that these 2 be the focus. So the other one's getting basics right. Because we're a long way from getting the basics right. And I've shared this with others before. Council gave us money to increase the capacity of CENAR, as we call it, which is the team that do the processing, with 30 caseworkers and 15 business support staff, which would get us to a capacity that would be reduced workloads to a point that is about the same in other authorities. We were way out of line with other authorities. We have actually appointed 13 new case officers, and we have appointed our business support staff. Unfortunately, of course, like everything we're doing with agency staff, just like in social care and Children's Trust, people have also left. And so keeping that full complement up is very, very difficult. So we're not fully staffed, but we have appointed to the resource that we were given. So we're nearly there, but there is still a lot of share. And partly because all authorities are fighting for the same people. We want experienced case officers And we want people who can be flexible enough and won't need that much training, because training takes time on an individual basis. I've indicated that as I've been raised before, we're still training staff by individual casework and then getting team managers together using particular cases as an example. Then we will move on as we improve the service to a much more rigorous and comprehensive training programme. And I know that this committee is interested in that programme. Difficulty for us at the moment is still the one I raised last time, that there are no school places. Again, we share the issue. Indeed, Sabine and I were talking about this yesterday, that our neighbouring authorities in a similar boat. We have very few special school places. There are very few independent school places available in good and outstanding schools. We prefer not to place children in failing schools. And that means then that we've got a lot of parents going through the appeal process, which is much longer now because of COVID. We can't do anything about that. That's a national problem. It's not a Birmingham issue, but for parents, it's a problem. The other thing that is a huge difficulty is that you take a lot of time having to consult with schools, particularly mainstream schools, who are often not quick at replying about whether they can meet a child's needs. And so therefore, you've got children who are not in school whilst, amongst other things, are waiting for the school to respond. And it's very difficult for parents, and I would have to say it's difficult for councils, it's difficult for officers to accept. Parents who don't have a plan have got a much quicker way of getting into mainstream schools than parents where the children have got a plan. The legislation is different. Parents can appeal on the admission arrangements, and that can be heard quickly, and they have a right to a place if there is one. Once you have a plan, you're not in that position. And so we have a system whereby children are out of school, and the paper explains how many we've got. We had 152 when this report was submitted to you. The table is at the back of the report. Yesterday, the latest figure was 146, because since then, 6 children where we were waiting for schools to respond have now been taken off the list and on roll. But that figure is changing all the time on a daily basis. And I want to say it is a lot higher than you saw the last time. I know that. Scott, that was a big concern, rightly, of yours. The reason for that is a simple one. Back in July, we had no idea how many children were out of school. It wasn't monitored. A system was put in place, so by September we knew what we knew, but actually we put in a rigorous investigation through home tuition invoices to be able to establish precisely. We've changed the system in terms of referral to the home bridging team. So we are very confident. I'll say that of last night, might change today, but last night we had 146 children out of school. Those children are given home education up to 25 hours, which is the statutory. I reported last time we've done a lot of check with authorities. That actually is generous in comparison to most authorities in the same situation. But we should be continuing on that generous route. It's vital where a child can manage 25, they get it, but lots of children can't, and lots of parents don't want it. But we're around 15 to 25, some children 15, some children 20, some children 20. And we will continue rigorously monitoring that group. We are negotiating with all of our schools, so we are on target to bring a obviously draft, and we're working with the co-question our town council in terms of ascend. And I've always been very open with you. I think Birmingham should have one. And that will enable us to be in a better position to bid for DFE resources, because the Chancellor announced 2.6 billion for capital places, both mainstream special and free school special places. We won't know until spring party report, so we've no idea. But at least with the sufficiency strategy, we'll be in a very good place to be able to bid for resources. But we're not waiting for that, we can't wait for that. So every single special school has had visits, often virtual, but that's not the point, visit with our not just seminar. I think the important thing is this is about the capital estate of the council. So our capital colleagues who are working with plans to see if schools can move some children out into other buildings to release places in the main special schools, which some are very interested in, some schools are really interested in. Increase by temporary accommodation their capacity. We're working with mainstream schools to have more resource bases. And if I give you an example, for next September, we need 10 new secondary resource bases for autism alone. That gives you a feel for the demand that we need to actually meet. It is a huge exercise. So we are doing absolutely as much as we can, and we are talking to all of the independent schools in Birmingham and around Birmingham, not just in Birmingham, but around Birmingham, where children could travel to see if they will increase their capacity so we can place children there. It's not a happy position to be in. I've never promised that. And of course, as I've shared with you before, the difficulty of being able to spend time, as I've done in my short time here, to really get underneath all these figures means that we're exposing more and more problems. But we need to know where we are if we're going to actually deal with that. So I don't apologise for exposing those problems to you. So current position, 146, and we're creating more places with our schools. Our schools are totally on board with all of this and understand the problems. As I say, resource bases are being negotiated as I speak now, and we will keep trying to get those 146 children somewhere in places. So that's a big bit of work. That isn't in getting the basics right, because Ofsted didn't look at that. It's the point that Sue's made. It's not just about the APP, because actually the real problem at the moment about being able to get the basics right and helping parents to go through the system and responding to parents is that we don't have anywhere to put the children. So that is such a key thing in terms of getting the basics right.
Okay, thanks, Pauline. I mean, where do we start, really? I think it's really frustrating and depressing that many of the key areas that were highlighted in the report have been subject of discussions here in the Scrutiny Committee over the last 2, 3, 4 years. It's not that we haven't raised a lot of these issues and had really in-depth discussions about them and officer reports, and we've gone over and over. I've lost count how many times we've asked questions about EHCPs, assessments, school places, and honest parental engagement and involvement. So all of those things, we've raised. I am a great believer that things happen for a reason, and I think the Ofsted review has positives to come from it, because clearly getting the basics right is something that we haven't done and that we desperately need to do. And I want to thank Sue for sharing with us some of the strides that have already taken place, and the honesty at looking at the review and saying, yes, we need to do a lot better, and particularly with that parental engagement and involvement. So I have got a couple of questions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in Councillor Scott and then Councillor Iro, and then if they don't ask my questions, I'll come in at the end, because we're doing all right for time, but we have only got about 10 minutes left on this one. So Councillor Scott.
Okay, I'll start with the good news first. I'm delighted to see the effort that's gone into making the sufficiency requirements information work better, and that it's joined up with funding with the DFE, because that's absolutely, like you say in your report, crucial to the future of the children in the city, that we get the right funding dropped down to the right children at the right time, and proving that those children exist is absolutely key to this. So thank you very much for the effort that you've made there. So with regard to that and the additional places that we require across the city, for instance, you mentioned the 10 schools for autism. I've got a real issue with funding free schools, independent schools, specialist schools, because they have so much autonomy to let down our children. And so I've got examples of children starting in September. Obviously, the school's got the funding for that EHCP child, and they've no longer had a school place for the next term because the school says they can't meet need. And I feel very, very strongly that we as a committee need to delve into the reasons why that is able to happen, and what part of the legislation is not supporting our children to have maintained places and consistent places, and that they're not let down in the future. So I really need to do some work with regard to speaking to the right people, and the Commissioner, I guess, is in the right position to do that, to speak to the DFE, but we need to provide information to uphold what's going on. So we need to use that information we've got and that you're collecting at the moment to sort of show what's happening to our children and why we need to change the legislation to support them. So I'd appreciate some support around that remit, or your opinion on that. With regard to home bridging, having gone through the home bridging experience, and bless them, and the effort that they make is tremendous. I realise that they have a very difficult task when it comes to children who've been traumatised by the school experience and don't want to engage when they're at home because they've suffered tremendously. And the reason they can't, there are many different reasons they can't be in school. Lack of school places, lack of the right provision, the school's not providing the right support for them while they're there, or enhancing that traumatic experience and making it difficult for them to engage with the home bridging team. That said, I think and feel more than anything is that we need more support in the home bridging team to enable them to have better and wider ways of engaging with these children. So if they don't want to engage online, or they do want to engage online, can we not enhance those systems and make it work a lot better? Then we'll know those children and what schools are going to work for them when we find them the school places they need. Just feel like that nuance there needs a little bit of sort of delving into, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. Sue,
I'm going to start off on the
of course you can.
I want to chip in. I think you raised a really important point about the fragmented system that we've got. And actually, we've all got a moral purpose to educate children. And I do see part of my role as being able to have conversations with head teachers around how can we support your school. You know, if you're not able to meet this child's needs, what is it that is causing the problems for you? Paul, you just updated that we've got more staff. I think there's been issues because we do need to be able to have staff officers who can talk to schools and have those conversations. I'm not saying that will sort it, because I absolutely think there's a need full legislation as well. And because sometimes if a school doesn't play nicely or play the game, there is very little, there's no power if it's an academy or free school. So I'm not saying we don't need that legislation, and I will happily support that. I would also support, ask this committee's support, because there's an ongoing consultation from the DFE, which I can send the link round, which is at the moment proposing to take the last bit of money that it gives to local authorities for school improvement. And yet the DFE wants to focus on attendance, which is right and proper, because we all want to focus on attendance. But children with additional needs and children with special educational needs and disabilities can't attend our school. We would the capacity. So I'm welcoming the new staff that we've got under Pauline's leadership of the service. But I think we need more capacity to work with those schools on the ground, not just to challenge, but we challenge, offer the support, the what if question. And that should locally provide some solutions to some of the issues, but it certainly doesn't take away your point for why aren't the schools legally accountable for providing the education for which they're receiving the funding. But I think it's a twin track approach, local and national.
Okay, so Scott.
That brings me back to the other point I was going to make from left for the time, but the training that we're giving to our wonderful new SENAR staff. It should be more than just the legislation. It should be what is the journey of the child from 0 to 25 that you are responsible for, and how do we enable schools to achieve that, and how do our SENAR staff become empowered to deliver that on behalf of parents and carers and supporters in that journey, to make sure that our children are well supported. We can't just rely on the early help offer, etc. Because, with all the will in the world, voluntary services don't have the powers that we do as an authority to, say, and with authority, what children need and how it should be delivered. We can put them in the right direction for the support, but we need our staff to be empowered to deliver that to the city, and then the schools to be respectful of that as well, to enable them to become better. That's the point.
Thanks, Councillor Stott. I want to come back on that.
All of us, they really support that. I'm wanting to work with Parent Care Forum to help staff understand the lived experiences of the children that we're supporting, and any multi-agency where we can get SENCOs together with our staff, training opportunities. Obviously, it's a bit more problematic with COVID, but we're still working on that, aren't we, Pauline?
Yeah, we have quite a strong SENCO network.
Yeah,
and the point absolutely that we want to really move forward in terms of there's a good understanding, or relatively good. I mean, you're never good, but there's a fairly good understanding of, for most, between the link between some areas of SEND and trauma and how we relate, including actually in our school's transport staff. But we need to be far more joined up, actually far beyond SEND, but as you say, with our early help services, with our third sector, to be able to ensure that staff understand the whole picture around the child, and also how to relate to parents. Because one of the things that I'm very clear about, is that, I think I get that too from California in terms of what you've got all experience, is that staff are not very empathetic with parents, often through their own stress, because we have to in SEND, it's a very stressful service. And so consequently, we have to do stress surveys with them all the time as well. Actually. But nevertheless, they should always be empathetic with staff, with professionals who themselves have got concern, etc., etc. And that has to be built into the training programme. We're absolutely committed to work with parents, with the Parent Care Forum, who are very supportive in helping us on that training journey.
Thanks, Pauline.
Councillor Iro.
Thank you. I'm pleased to see that work has been going on all the objectives. It's really great. On objective 4, so you talk about data tracking, that it's difficult to track the pupils because every school uses a different tracking system, which obviously I know as a secondary school teacher, that's a massive problem. But you should be able to get targets for all pupils because all schools set targets and whether children are meeting their target or on target to meet their target. So hopefully that can be sorted. But I think the other 2 areas that you talk about in objective 4 that haven't been talked about in the progress section, attendance and exclusion. So hopefully you should be able to get that data easily so caseworkers can start making progress on that. And the needs pupils, again, I should think that data is easy to get hold of and to make progress on that. Just wonder whether anything's been done about that. And then you talked a lot about places already, that that we need more places. Is there a move to make more a new special school, or is it just getting mainstream schools to take more pupils? And then the home bridging team, which again has been mentioned already. I mean, I emailed a few weeks ago, 4 weeks ago now, about one of my residents whose child was in a Solihull school, as they've said that they can't meet their needs. So they've been at home for 14 months and they haven't been receiving this home teaching. And I've been chasing it for Senna and still haven't had a reply. And I've been chasing it again and still haven't had a reply. And I'm like, well, it's worrying, isn't it?
Well, perhaps I could talk you.
Thank you.
On the special school, no, that would, Councillor Scott referenced it in terms of the free school programme. We don't know what it is. The free school is just an academy. So we have some really good special school academies in Birmingham. So I don't personally think that's a fear. We're not allowed to have our own special new schools, and it's just against the law. And so it's either a free school academy, it's the same thing, or nothing. So, we need to be ready to actually bid, but it's also using the site in special schools. So I could come on to the pathway one which actually it isn't as easy because we have no right to have information from schools like school targets, etc., etc. And that is where the difficulty is. So each school is using different systems. We technically have no right to have the information. And we are, through our programme of delivering local provision, the DLP programme, with 14 million having been provided from the High Needs Block over 2 years to improve the commitment of our schools, and some of it comes from special in terms of supporting mainstream schools, to actually find a way, and we are really struggling, not just with mainstream, but with special, and they're struggling with each other because they all have different systems. Do you have to get a system so that we can track like that? So it is much more complicated, exacerbated by COVID, because of course we've had no national data now, because we've had no national system. So that is complicated, very complicated. Yeah, attendance exclusions, as we all know, there are hidden exclusions, so not all reported. I mean, we've had this discussion now, that is, but technically it should be easier. On needs, we do have that information. We do need to improve that because our needs are far too high for children with SEND, and we will be actually committing some particular resource there to look at all the various opportunities that should be available for young people with SEND. But as I said, that particular objective, that pathway, has only at this minute tried to focus on seeing what systems the schools have and seeing if there's any possibility of getting some sort of system in place where we can track.
Thank you, Pauline. I have got just on the pathways area. I mean, there is talk of plans by the WDP to introduce some new rules around students claiming universal credit, and I know that if those are brought in, that they could make it much more difficult for some of our young people to achieve good outcomes. So, that is quite worrying. I'm going to bring Jo in because Jo's indicated that she wants to come in.
Thank you. It just kind of crosses over between the previous question from Councillor Scott and Councillor Laura. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So sorry if it adds a duplication, but when she just mentioned in regards to the young person within her borough that she had referred to, that actually didn't connect in with the home bridging team, I just wanted to, obviously something to take away, not for you to answer on the spot unless you can. But if a young person isn't picked up by the home bridging team, just how we are kind of that trauma-informed approach that Councillor Scott referred to, that how that wraparound would be, how that young person would be supported in that way if they're not supported by the home bridging team.
Well, because of the new system, they should be supported by the home bridging team. As I say, that wasn't the case before, but they should be supported by the home team. I am very conscious that there are children, we've got too many children where parents are keeping children out of school because they don't, and I'm not challenging parents in that, but nevertheless, I think there we do have an issue where they're not actually, the parents don't want them to stay in mainstream and they're going through the tribunal appeal process. And in those cases, we don't provide provision because the children should be in school. It may not be the school that the parent wants, but they should be in the school. So we don't provide provision. What the impact that we do need to be much better in dealing with our other services in terms of linking information through both to early help, to our health colleagues, etc. We are getting better in terms of our own teaching services and educational psychology services within education skills, but we need to be better with our other partners so that colleagues are looking at groups of children who are out of provision in some form or fashion, and that is clearly work that has to be done.
Thanks, Pauline. Just I think your comment around parents choosing to keep children away from school. I'm going to bring in a parent and then I'm going to bring in Councillor Scott on that point.
Thank you very much. Pauline, I think you really need to be very, very careful around suggesting that parents keep their children on school deliberately. No parent wants to keep their child at school. They want their child to have an education like everybody else. But if that means sending them to a school that isn't suitable, cannot provide provision, and actually is causing mental health issues and trauma, you would still expect them to send them to that school because otherwise they can't get provision.
Yeah, I think we do have to be extremely careful. We mentioned it earlier, just about the language that we use and how that we phrase and state things, because I think that is very, very important, because
I think there's also the element there around the elective homeschooling cohort, that we know that actually that term elective isn't always the case. There are cases where a young person is in the middle of transitioning from mainstream to special, or mainstream if they can't meet need, we've offered that child or young person. That family is not then electively choosing to homeschool, they don't have a choice. So I think it is retrieving that point around the language.
Yeah, and I think we need to work together around that and around the language that we use, and I'm sure that's something Sue, she's nodding, so we'll pick up on. Councillor Scott, did you want to come in on that point?
I very much like to reiterate what you guys have just said, but drill down into a couple of nuances just to clarify. So first and foremost, there's the school side of things. Are the schools reporting that absence correctly? What are they telling you that makes you miss a child that's out of school? My child was out of school for a year. No one from the authority was aware, other than when I told them. So what is it the schools are putting in the registration or the databases that you receive that misses that child. That's what I want an answer to. So if you can take that away and come back and drill into that, that'd be very helpful. Secondly, from a parental perspective, you're absolutely right. We're not talking mainstream school places here. We're talking specialist provision for children who have special educational needs. We're not talking, you know, my neurotypical child going to my local school and I'm going, do you know what, I don't like it, I'm going to keep him up and make him homeschool me. It is not that scenario, and you cannot conflate the two. And I have massive issues with using that language, and we spoke about language with the youth service earlier, and I would reiterate that you cannot say that I am keeping my child out of school when the school is damaging that child because they're not meeting their needs. You need to look into every individual case of a child who doesn't have a school place and understand that child and that personal circumstance, and do not come to me with that judgmental attitude and that assumption, I suppose is a better word to use, that we're all in it for a better, higher quality, more expensive provision, because it is simply not the case. And I would like to see more work drill down into the specifics on the off-rolling situation, the exclusion situation, the absence situation, to show me that you have a better understanding of what our lives are like.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. I think it's some very important points made, and I know that we are running out of time now. Some very important points made, because I'm sure that all of us in this room will have some lived experience of supporting children with special educational needs. And I think it's also a very important point to note that parents do not choose to keep their children at home, because, you know, parents' lives, if their child has not got a suitable school place that meets their child's needs, those lives are put on hold. So we have to be very aware of that.
And just perhaps if I can say.
No, I'm going to let you come back, Pauline. I'm going to let you come back.
It wasn't deliberately, Katie. I didn't say that. And absolutely right. Of course, we'll do that in kind society. I'm absolutely in support of severe. I don't think elective home education is a very helpful term, and in terms of our head of attendance, is also a thing is not a helpful term. But we do have children. I'm not saying that it's the right position, but they could be in a school, but it may well be the wrong school, is the point I was making. They could be in a school, and we've got to work with them. And I hope that the intent will be on the restructure of the caseworkers, that the caseworkers will know the children much better than has been the case before. The intention is that it will be better to know the child and therefore be able to challenge things about that individual child, exactly as Councillor Scott said.
And I know you're going to listen to what we said, because you did the same with the sufficiency requirements thing, and you've really drilled down into that. So we don't want to get caught up on the language today, because I know you're listening, and that you're going to produce something that is really quality in terms of something that we can work on to improve the situation for parents and children.
Thank you. I'm being very challenged in terms of time, so I am going to give you, I've got 3 people, minute each, Sarah, Joe, and then I'll give you the last word, if that's okay. Sarah?
Yeah, thank you. Mine's just an observation really. So I've sat on this committee for 6 years as head teacher in a primary school in Birmingham. I'm now Director of Education for Church of England schools across Birmingham. And I find Pauline's approach really refreshing, actually. I think she calls it as it is, and she has absolutely got down into a number of areas with factual information, and isn't apologising for them, saying, just recognising they're terrible and noting that there's more to be done. And I don't think we can start to rebuild without knowing what we're trying to rebuild, actually. And I want to note that. I think that's really important. And And I'm glad that the parents are involved too, because actually doing a load of things doesn't necessarily take the experience for the families. And I always ask the families whether what we're doing is having the right impact. I think it's really important. What I want though is I want the action plan and the measurable improvements against that. Which you haven't got here, I appreciate that's in the process, and I want that triangulated with parents so that what the measurement, the metrics are saying it's improving is backed up by parents saying it's improving. But I would like to thank Pauline for her.
Thanks, Sarah. Jo?
Thank you. It's just a quick one. I don't want to go over it again, but I just want to just add further emphasis just to what you're saying before, because also there's a volume of parents out there that have actually lost jobs while they're looking after their young people. So again, I think that's really important to note that. So when we're doing the lived experience piece, that we're actually taking them into consideration to really drill down and really understand that experience, to really gather a strong understanding around that to really inform this piece of work. And I leave that.
Thank you for reiterating that point. Last word.
I was just going to say that being in a school isn't necessarily the best thing, even though they're in school. But apart from that, I think the home bridging needs really looking at, because home is a safe place for the young person. And if education has been the reason why they are traumatised, we're trying to then bring that trauma into their environment, the home environment, so they're not going to learn. So we need to look at different. So we need to look at different environments where the home bridging can go with the young person rather than it being within their safe place. We need to look at post-16 as well, 19.
That's a really good point. And Pauline's nodding, so she's taken that on board. Yeah. And Sue is nodding. Sue, I think the consultation that you referred to earlier, that would be really useful if you could whiz that round to us, because I'm sure that we'll all have a look at that and participate, because it's important. And really, the only last thing was that the 4 priority areas, because we've got SEND on the agenda at every meeting, next year. I think it'd be really useful, and I know that the chair agrees, if the 4 priority areas could be broken down so that a project manager reports back on each of those.
So we have a focus.
We have a focus. Yes, there is so much to talk about, but we'll never delve into anything in any great detail.
Would it be appropriate then, I think, for the first one to be in co-production, working well together? Yeah, we'll bring that next time.
We'll leave that with you to decide on how best to approach that in terms of subject matter, as long as we're covering all of it over the course of the meetings and nothing's being left out. Because we do not want to be in the same situation that we've been in, where we've raised issues, had discussions, said, this needs to be better, being promised the world, and ended up being in this position again. And I'm not saying we will do, because it sounds like, real strides are being taken. But the proof is in the pudding. Savia, you're killing me here.
I'm just a bit interested to come, because we're not sure when you were invited to this meeting. Is it okay?
Savia, I would, I'm sure that everybody here agrees. I'll have to run it past the chair clearly, but, I am more than happy to have the Parents' Carer Forum and parents at these meetings, because I think that is a really important thing, and I think it's a real commitment shown to that parent involvement and engagement. So I want to thank everybody for being here, and we look forward to having those regular updates. And clearly, Sue, if there's anything you think we should have in between meetings, please send that through to us so that we can be fully briefed and aware of what's going on.
I know we're really tight on time. I just wanted to say how proud I am actually that we could have this difficult conversation that we just had, because it's been professionally done. We've had called out for parents' use of language, we talked it through. We will take those messages back to our staff, and that will help things for children. So I think it's a sign of a sophisticated group of people who are able to have those difficult conversations and still be around the table, because we're not always going to agree, but determined. We are, I know we're all determined to work as a team to get better outcomes for those children. So thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And that totally, we're all here for the same reason. And we have our job to do, but that is to scrutinise the work of the council to ensure that, our children are receiving the services that they require and need and deserve. So, yeah, very grateful, and we look forward to the January meetings, get the next update. And thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. So, we are just going to move on to item 8 on the agenda, the work programme. So I'm going to open that up because we have not got a lot on the work programme in terms of a couple of the meetings in the new year. The chair has asked that we can have child sexual exploitation and school exclusions added to the work programme. We have talked today about having the youth service back early next year to give us some important updates. So I would like to look at where we can put those in. I'm aware that we haven't had an update on Hunters Hill, and I'm assuming that might be able to come into the January meeting under all attendance and exclusions. But I'm asking the committee to put forward any other areas of focus for meetings next year. Councillor Scott?
I agree that school attendance discloses are be relevant to the water still.
Yeah.
In the January meeting underneath that item. Obviously, from February onwards, we've got nothing in there. Probably up to the chair to have that discussion about how we want to break down and send work, the pace of work, today to
make those
decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, Councillor Scott, because I think if members identify any areas that they would like to go onto the work programme, if you could email those through to our chair and Amanda, and we can start having a look at that. And there was some discussion about doing some joint work around mental health with the Health and Adult Care Committee, and I think that is something that we should still pursue, because given the last 2 years and how that has affected the mental health of young people in particular, I think that's an area where we could really do some good joined up work. Councillor Scott?
Yeah, actually, just on that point, very good reminder for me that the mental health service working with youth has, with education, has gone to the Health and Social Care Committee, but not come to our committee. So we keep back over what's gone to health that might be relevant to our committee. So if we could look into that and just see, where the crossover is and make sure we've got.
Fantastic. Okay then, date of the next meeting is not the 22nd of December, it is the 12th of January. So I want to wish everybody season greetings, because we won't see you before Christmas. Have we got any requests for calling at all? No. Any other urgent business? No. And do you give authority to the chair and officers that in urgent situation between meetings, the chair jointly with relevant chief officer has authority to act on behalf of the committee? Thank you very much. And that is the end of the meeting. And thanks all for coming.